Thank you. Our next speaker for today is Mr. Lloyd Mathias, who is an investor and business strategist. He invests, partners, and collaborates with founders of early-stage companies in the areas of AI, EdTech, data analytics, and digital technology. He is a board member and advisor to companies in technology and consumer space. A science graduate from St. Xavier's College, Mr. Mathias has an MBA from Bombay University and did a senior executive program at London Business School. He is among India's best-known marketeers who has built and nurtured powerful global brands, and in 2015 was chosen among the world's best marketeers by International Marketing List magazine. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for those warm words, Swarnali. And just a small observation. I know it's the second half of the day and always difficult. Just wanted to compliment the Bengal Chamber and specifically the audience. I have done a few sessions across, and I'd say that there's a very engaged group of people that are really keen to learn just by the questions and the fact that everyone's paying serious attention to the speakers. Two wonderful panel discussions, and of course the context setting by Anup and earlier Abhijit and Prashant's session. So been thoroughly enjoying this this particular conference. I'm also glad it's about D2C, a space that doesn't get the recognition that it needs. And clearly an emerging space. If you just look at the whole D2C model, it's relatively new, it's relatively young, and it's growing at an amazing pace. What I hope to do in the next 20-25 minutes is just give a brief overview and also share a bit of the perspective of what do VCs and investors specifically look at in this space. The fact that some of the big unicorns and some of the big growth areas have really come from this space, and that's really the perspective I want to share. So just quickly, an overview, and I know Abhijit covered some part of it in his opening keynote. One is the size of the direct-to-consumer market is growing and growing very rapidly. In 2021, we talked about $55 billion. There is an expectation that by 2030, this could double to as much as $100 billion, right? And when one talks of direct-to-consumer, very often we collate it with only online sales. Remember that a lot of large brands go direct-to-consumer. Sai from HUL just shared. Very often large brands also go direct-to-consumer through their own exclusive stores and often through their own online stores. So I think that's a factor that needs to be remembered. But net, this is growing amazingly and really a 15x growth in the past decade. So very few channels or categories can have this kind of growth. To quickly touch upon the factors driving D2C growth, I think first is the internet penetration. The point of inflection, so to speak, was 2016 when Jio came in and disrupted Wi-Fi pricing. Today, leaving India at the place in the world where data prices is at its lowest. Right? We've all seen the period when, maybe 10 years back, some of the savvy tech guys would spend the last 2 days of the month downloading their favorite movies because your data was finite. And today, we really don't bother about it, right? Data pricing has really come so low that virtually everyone has access. On the back of that has grown a whole range of industries. If you look at some of the big D2C companies today, I think they have really been technically post-2016 phenomena when the internet penetration jumped. The second factor is really the trust and quality and price buying directly from the seller, right? And that's part of our old buying behavior. The moment you go directly to a seller, your belief is that you will get a much better value deal. The third, often ignored, is the strong brand experience. Two previous panelists brought this up very well. Shamaran from Just My Roots talked about recreating the magical experience of a son getting food prepared by his mother the previous night and sharing it over a call, right? I think these brand experiences are what D2C enables that traditional businesses and large legacy companies struggle to do, right? The fact that you can actually take a bit of that magic thanks to digitization, thanks to personalization, and the fact that you have small, nimble companies that can fulfill a consumer experience. And I think the last thing is really all of us and consumers in general really have an omni-channel existence. We don't live just in the online world and we don't just live in the offline world. And contrary to opinion, even young teens and digital natives, there is a bit of the physical world we like. So the fact that brands are enabling an online experience, omni-channel experience really adds to that customer experience. There are times, and pujas are around the corner, when you physically want to go to stores, you want to check out things, when shopping itself becomes a great experience. And there are times the comfort of wanting to shop from your couch, right? Like they say, the only thing that gets tired when you're shopping digitally is your thumb, because you can keep scrolling endlessly. And biggest driver, I think, to this whole thing is Gen Z and millennials, right? Not being either of these categories, I've seen the fact that of a decade ago, shopping for something as personal as shoes and something that one wouldn't do online. I think today that's become a reality, right? We all have realized that it's no longer just music and books and apparel. There's a whole range of products that we can do online. And millennials and Gen Z digital natives that they are doing a lot more. And that's changing behaviors in a large extent, right? So the growth will accelerate in the next 5 years, and it will accelerate remarkably. Just a couple of data points on why we're saying that there'll be 500 million online shoppers. Today the number is closer to 190 million Indians who are online. One, of course, the big jump of smartphone users, right? We've seen the prices come rock bottom. So again, today, smartphone prices in India are really low. With manufacturing commencing in India and having commenced, this will only improve. So you'll see a huge growth in smartphone penetration. I think internet usage is going to grow. We already have a very large internet user base of around 800 million. This is expected to grow to 1.3, of course, as India's population grows. But as internet touches the interiors, there's something called the Bharat broadband, which is connecting a whole lot of rural and interior India. And with a range of digital services being delivered online, thanks to India's technology and the India stack, as we call it, this growth is only going to accelerate. And therefore, the number of online shoppers will really grow significantly to 500 million, right? And just for perspective, to recognize that the numbers we're talking about is much larger than the population of most countries, including the US. So that's a huge market that really makes this opportunity really large. Remember, India is the third largest retail market in the world already at 821 million, expected to hit almost 2 trillion, 1.9 trillion in 2030, right? And that's a CAGR of 10%. So the size of this retail market is too large for businesses around the world to ignore, right? So one is with manufacturing growing within, India becomes a large market. But two is also the fact that this is a hugely inviting market, and therefore it has the eyes of companies around the world, and certainly the investor community to a large extent. E-commerce penetration is growing. I think we saw a big spurt in 2020 when the lockdown hit us and our lives changed. But month on month, one is seeing a growth in e-commerce, both in terms of depth, the homes it's reaching, the geographies it's reaching, and in terms of the number of products and items that most of us buy. What began initially as largely one-off fashion, lifestyle items, today has become regular groceries. Today, a lot of us are hooked on to things like Big Basket, Milk Basket, where you regularly get a lot of your products. So the e-commerce market size moving from US $70 billion to 214 billion in the next 5 years. So really we're seeing significant growth in e-commerce as well. Now just contrasting buying to something that we all understand very well as music, right? Music has seen the largest ever digital adoption. Today, 85 to 90% of music sales in the world are digital, right? So streaming is the way forward. A lot of us remember the days of vinyl records, of CDs, of cassette tapes. I think now they're really relegated to collector's items. People who are really, passionate about the old. but the bulk of music is really consumed streaming. And I saw a report of the global music industry which said 97% of all global revenues in music comes direct. Now, one component of direct which is growing is artist live performances. People don't just want to consume music through streaming. Now and then they want to watch an artist live. So live performance is also one, but that again is direct to consumers. Artists performing live, reaching real audiences. There's a small segment that's still physical, holding out, and rightly so. But this is an example of how adoption happens, right? Music, of course, is in that sense not so much about touch and feel like various other items, but clearly indicative of how D2C is here to grow. Now, some of the reasons that consumers want to shop directly, I think the COVID-19 and lockdown changed consumer behavior once and for all. Who would have expected, 8-year-olds doing online classes, but that was the reality of what we got used to. The speed and convenience, door delivery and through e-commerce. The other thing that's been pointed out is the growth of social media. There was a time when to get onto media, to get onto television, involved big budgets. Large companies could afford. I remember even as recently as 5 years back, to get a spot on the IPL, and any brand would need at least, say, 30 spots to make some impact, would mean that as an advertiser, you have to spend at least upwards of 3 to 5 crores. The last IPL, the one that Jio Cinema did digitally, they had a sum total of 13,000 advertisers. So if you were a halwai in Udaipur, you could target Jio streaming of the IPL in a particular part of Udaipur, and you could advertise. And therefore, advertisers came in with budgets as low as 8 to 10,000 rupees. So digital and social is also ensuring that you can target specifically, you can target at a much lower cost out as opposed to large budgets. And of course, you have social media and social commerce and influencers, right? And influencers are not just superstars and those who have 1 million followers. The kid next door with 2,000 followers that has a real point of view about, the glitter she puts on her nails, influences a small and relevant cohort for whom some brand sees a lot of value, right? So I think those are another aspects. I think importantly, consumers also realize that they can have a say in the product development. Two young entrepreneurs here, Shamaran and Debaditya, talked about the fact that they're constantly listening to what consumers want, right? So if there's a feedback, if a young consumer is looking forward to having the paish prepared by his mom the previous evening, that's possible to make happen. And therefore, consumers today feel the need to have a say in product development. Businesses, they want to sell directly as well. I think most obviously is faster to market, right? Immediate access to channels and customers. You don't always have to depend on an intermediary. Most important, better access to customer data. For a lot of businesses, historical legacy businesses, you were so dependent on your intermediary channels, your partners, that you lost sight of the customer. Today, with real-time customer data, you can reformulate, you can change your product, you can alter your product, you can tweak your go-to-market, you can make a whole lot of changes because a lot of the feedback is real-time, it's relevant. Importantly, brands and businesses can cross-sell and upsell. So you know a consumer's buying pattern, you know what he's typically likely to buy at what particular time of the day, you can cue in certain stimuli, you can cue in certain communication to him. Then comes the better customer experience. The fact that today consumers don't just want to consume your product, they want to experience your product in toto. And therefore, having a lot of data, having a lot of nuance about consumer behavior can ensure you can give him a much better customer experience. And the obvious need for business is improved margins, right? D2C lets manufacturers save roughly, and I'm using a broad indicator, around 14-15% out of their first level distribution, and often brands that go direct to retailers will spend another 30-40%. So there's a substantive chunk of your business outlay that's kept for the intermediary channels, which D2C lets you be able to own and use by yourself. I'll just give you a quick schematic of the difference. This is how the traditional offline route to market, when folks like me entered the workforce, this was the normal, right? From the manufacturer, the brand, It went to a regional warehouse or a CNF agent. You then went to a distributor. Very often brands had wholesalers to play with. Then you had a retailer, eventually to the consumer. And this whole process could vary. Even the most efficient companies, some of the FMCG majors, typically had the equivalent of a 21 day cycle from the time something left their factory to the time a consumer used it. And that resulted in a whole range of concerns. One was, this was expensive because there were a lot of intermediary layers. It was a slow movement of goods, right? There were problems, transportation areas, octroi, various issues that delayed it. Higher time to market and consumer feedback, right? I've been witness to products that didn't do very well, but it took almost a month for the company to recognize it. And by the time they altered things or changed the scheme, it was too late. A lot of money was lost. They had very limited access to customer data, right? You never knew what was happening really at the consumer end. There was a high capex in distribution and lack of opportunity for small players, right? They said till about a decade ago, to really launch something nationally, you needed a large outlay in terms of cash. Today, in the new world with third-party manufacturing, third-party logistics, with digital payment infrastructure, a relatively small player can reach maybe at least 60-70% of some of the FMCG behemoths in the matter of months, right? So the whole barrier to entry has kind of come down quite dramatically. Now this is the D2C route to the market, fairly simplistic as we can see. It's really from the brand to the consumer, with typically one, maybe sometimes two levels, right? So directly to the brand website, directly through a marketplace, or through a few offline stores, right? Higher go-to-market speeds, very obvious. Greater control over customer data and CX. We talked about it. I think this is a critical element. Enables engagement and repeat purchase. So you know exactly key elements of the consumer behavior matrix to tweak around. Centralized inventory, right? So your inventory management becomes far more rational as opposed to having multiple levels of distributors, wholesalers, where you have a lot of stock lying idle, unpaid for, which is actually lying on your books. Now there's a much more tighter sorting of inventory. You can reroute products far more easily. A centralized inventory. And lastly, more opportunity to innovate, right? The fact that you have, there's very little between you and the consumer, the end consumer. I think brands can innovate far more frequently. I can tell you that in the telecom business in the early 2000s, basis the first 1 or 2 hours of a call center when you launch a new, a new tariff or a new program, you actually knew what was the mood and you could quickly tweak it. Now this can happen real time, right? And that is a huge advantage. I think we've seen what are the sectors that really dominate D2C. There's fashion, lifestyle and accessories, there's beauty and skin care, there's hygiene and personal care, there's packaged foods, healthy snacks and beverages. Pet food as well is emerging. I think these are fairly obvious. I think the opportunity for entrepreneurs, and this is the part that I want to just stress a little bit in terms of what are investors looking for and what could be a takeaway for a lot of the entrepreneurs here in the audience, is there are huge amount of niche opportunities that D2C can fulfill that traditionally big players struggle because of their large systems, processes, and their ability to. Of course, I know that lots of companies are incubating units, but there are huge areas for niche segments. Like I said, one is the speed to market and the customization. We heard examples of two brands today that do remarkable levels of customization. Today, you can not just customize your communication to a individual, you can also customize your product to some extent, not to some extent, to a large extent. Some of you saw a program that Dairy Milk ran, where you could wish your friend on his birthday with a Dairy Milk bar with his name on it. A couple of years back, Coke ran a promotion where you could change the label customized to it. So today, you can actually have faster to market, but more customization. And then, like I said, better access to customer data, allowing purchase behavior and changing needs. So cross-selling and upselling, better control of the customer experience and improved margins, right? So clearly there is a big opportunity for niche categories. To be a D2C entrepreneur today is, in a sense, easier than ever, right? Obviously, you need to have a great idea. You need to have a deep, shall we say, a deep mining of consumer insight. But if you look at the entire process, from product manufacturing to website app building, to brand building, marketing, sales, logistics, payment, you've got a whole range of ready-to-use apps, right? When it comes to websites and app, you have things like Shopify, you have Shopmatic, right? Things where, you can get instant help in developing your digital storefront, right? That's something that's possible. In terms of brand building and marketing, there are a whole range of apps that work, right? So CleverTap, Automate, we've seen a whole range of brand building and marketing tools that can help you. In terms of sales, if you don't have your own sales force, obviously you can be part of one of the big platforms, Amazon, Flipkart, there's a whole range of them. And there's ONDC, right, which doesn't call itself understandably a platform, they call themselves a protocol. But ONDC actually opens up the whole ecosystem, right? So as a buyer, you can choose your seller, you can choose your intermediary, you can choose your payment gateway, and therefore it truly democratizes the whole process of direct to consumer. You're no longer, let's say a victim or indebted to one or two large platforms. You can actually play a much wider field. But more importantly, in the context of sellers, it opens up the field in a far more democratic manner. We all know that sellers are, in a sense, held to ransom by the big platforms, right? Because depending on the kind of volume or the advertising you buy on some of the large platforms, you get listed up there. When you're looking for a laptop, you'll get the obvious ones. With ONDC, actually this opens up and makes room for a lot more players. There are a whole lot of logistics partners that can help fulfill your last mile or your middle mile, right? From Blue Dart to delivery, there are a series of fulfillment partners. So you really don't need to work in build up that aspect. And of course, I think payment gateways, India is possibly the gold standard for the world. Instant payment digitally with adequate security built in. That really makes it. So if you look at the entire value chain, there are a lot of D2C enablers readily available. And of course, in terms of customer support, right? So whether it is, the various sales forces of the world, there are so many aspects of customer support that you have. So I think today for a first-time entrepreneur or for an entrepreneur in D2C, the enablement ecosystem is fairly robust and fairly complete, right? He does not have to discover every aspect. And as he grows, and in the world of digital, they say it's always work in progress or it's a permanent beta world. As you progress, you can keep adding elements, you can keep tweaking it. I heard D2C-Expert briefly say about how he spent a lot of money building the app by the same people who built Swiggy, right? So as your revenues come in, as you grow, you can fine-tune your product, you can match up with the best in the world. And the reality is that for today's consumers, the expectation is a level playing field, right? You don't expect a new app you've downloaded to work any less efficiently than an Amazon or a Flipkart. Or you don't expect a Nama Yatri, very, very popular in Bangalore, to work any less efficiently than an Uber and Ola. So you're actually competing with the best in the world. But today you have the opportunity, you have the wherewithal for it. So D2C will truly democratize the market. And I think that is a hugely welcome step. What will it take to succeed in the D2C market? I think first and foremost, and I think one of the golden rules of marketing is anticipating and fulfilling consumer needs, right? So no matter as much of customer feedback you get from various intermediaries, I think going out, listening to real consumer experiences, meeting real consumers, meeting users of your product, seeing what's right and wrong with them, cannot be replaced. So anticipating and fulfilling consumer needs is going to be the key. The second is obviously the uniqueness of your proposition. What is it that you bring that is absolutely unique, that can't be easily replicable, or fulfills a very specific niche in the market? The third, great customer experience. And customer experience is really not just about the way you design your app or your website, it's the entire value chain. From the time the consumer is seeking your business, your brand out, to the time it's getting fulfilled, to the time you're queuing him a next moment for consumption. Here's an important occasion, here's an anniversary, good reason to use my product again. At the same time, doing it discreetly. There's a very, very fine line between being intuitive, between being responsive, and invading someone's privacy. You don't want consumers to feel creepy about your need. So I think great customer experience involves a lot of human nuancing. It's not something that can easily happen. And of course, we talked of personalization and customization. People do not want random spam messages. If there's not something relevant for me, which is authentic in tone, which speaks to me, which speaks to my need, which addresses me in a proper manner, which is mailed to me or stimulus sent to me at a particular point in time, that will work. So I think recognizing and understanding the consumer are most important. Get them to your website, but make it sticky, right? So it's not just about driving traffic, but about making them stay long enough and fulfilling their need. And working hard at customer endorsements. I think something that I always stress at is that getting real customers to endorse you, authentic customers to endorse you, not paid for reviews to boost up your ranking and 5-star ratings, I think is worth its weight in gold. So when real consumers go, and very often it's actually a small prod, a small reminder, going that extra mile to get consumers to remind you. I've got a small section here, purely, and I think given the Bengal Chamber, saying that why is it, and I keep getting asked this question, why is it that startups from the East don't get the same level of funding, the same level of attention? I just got another couple of slides to share, which I think would be relevant for the audience. I think here are some of the challenges for D2C startups in Bengal. And I must confess, from what I saw in the earlier sessions, at least these folks have clearly overcome them, but just some thoughts. I think clearly if you just look out as an outside in, and I've seen startup pitches across the country, from the NCR region, Delhi, the startups have the self-confidence, the flash and courage. That's what comes through in every transaction, right? Mumbai and the greater Bombay region have integrity, conviction, and ambition. Right? Bangalore, the tech capital, startups have technology, and technology, right? So all the tech-led startups are headquartered there. But all these have a steady state of funding, right? So there's a well-entrenched networks. For anyone with a reasonably good idea, with a kind of proof of market concept that works, it's much easier, right? My experience has been that Kolkata startups usually have a great product idea and a sincere belief that it will work out of rational judgment, but don't have enough of the enabling ecosystem. And by that I mean primarily, a very well-developed angel investment market. And therefore you see a lot of founders relocating or kind of moving their business. At a macro level, it's like a lot of Indian startups that want to go global, they perforce relocate themselves to Singapore or go down to the Silicon Valley. So I think that's an issue that begets some introspection. I'm sure the Bengal Chamber would like to look at it, but I really believe that that's it. I've got some thoughts on what they need to do is to really grow exposure. And I would say one is exposure to peer groups. It's not always investors, it's about like-minded founders. It's about going through that whole struggle or that learning curve, if you may, together. I think it's to work with investors who are able to look at the larger story, right? Very often investors come with very short investment timelines and most importantly, short attention spans. I think it's the ability to say that there's a lot more conviction. If a market that is more traditional, that's more rooted in history, is able to adopt, then that says a lot. Its acceptance in other markets will be so much more easier. I think to work closely with media to project them wonderfully. I mean, I do concede that a lot of the business press picks up and amplifies startups in the big three, right? So it's, Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, and NCR, which is their favorites. But I think clearly there's a case, and I know, this really needs to be amplified. In the world of digital media, it's easy to do. And to forums like this that can play a multiplier effect, all right? How do you really take the idea and run larger, right? So this is why I would say a lot of startups are under the radar, underfunded, and in a sense, undernourished. And I think the opportunity to change that is here and is large. So that's really my appeal as an investor or what needs to be done. Since we are closer to the end of the thing, I just want to leave the last section, wearing my old, marketeer's hat and talk about 4 insights that are very relevant to the D2C space. And I won't keep this very long. I think the one is that post-pandemic, I think, and why I say it's launched for D2C, is that a lot of people are prioritizing on health, happiness, and simplicity, right? The first 6 months of the lockdown taught most of us that how little it takes for us to, live a comfortable life, right? You have your family with you. You don't have to go out dining to a fine dine restaurant. You can have so much fun. But that really made a lot of people introspect about what they want out of life, right? So people looked at digital detox, people looked at protecting themselves, boosting their immunity. We all tried those various concoctions, adding haldi to our milk and so on and so forth. Also about mindfulness. So I think consumers today have become, and a segment of consumers have become realistically very focused on this. And segment that D2C can address, to my mind, much better than large corporations can. Right? The fact that consumers are going back to slightly more basic needs, and smaller brands can actually cater to this direct to consumer. The second is really omni-channel being omnipresent, that you can have this network built in micro geographies. So while your digital presence is large, but you can have a fulfillment ecosystem built with a set of retailers in a small area, really letting consumers experience the full strength of what your brand can do, right? So consumers can have frictionless experiences, totally in tune with their lifestyle. The last, and Sai briefly touched upon the fact that brands are seeking a larger purpose. And this is even truer of younger consumers. All things equal, consumers want businesses and brands that give back to the community that they take from, right? And therefore, consumers are beginning to look at things that a brand does outside of just pushing the price-value equation. Are you contributing a bit back to the society? Are you doing things in an ethical manner? Are you able to stand up for things that your consumers believe in, right? In the NCR, we've seen pollution being a serious issue. Brands that are consciously taking calls, helping people out, advocating carpooling, are being rewarded. And again, D2C can actually speak to these small sets of consumers for whom ethics and values matter. I think lastly is taking cognizance of the influencer. The influencer is not just, a guy with 1 million followers who can churn out viral videos. It's also people who can influence your brand's narrative and can talk about the unique selling points, right? They are niche and growing audiences. Some of them command, as most of you know, that the largest single media channel in this country is YouTube, right? It's not, as you thought, your favorite TV channel. That's how large it is. And therefore, cultivating a body of influencers in a rational manner who can amplify your brand narrative has a huge bit of value, right? So I'll leave it at that. Just 4 insights, good for D2C brands. A few thoughts on what it takes for the Bengal ecosystem, the D2C ecosystem to kickstart. And happy to take a few questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.
You had a slide on ONDC. If you know a little more as the status of that, what's happening around that, I would appreciate it.
So ONDC, like I said, is really being built as a protocol. It's a Section 8 company. They are not built for profit. They're not seeking to replace an Amazon or a Flipkart. What they want to do is open up the ecosystem so a small buyer can get onto the platform, a seller can get onto the platform. You can choose all the intermediary levels, the fulfillment, the payment mechanism. What they're seeking to do, in a sense, is what the government stated policy is to replicate the NPCI. This company called National Payments Council of India, right? They created the the UPI. ONDC is seeking to be the UPI of the e-commerce ecosystem, saying that why should e-commerce be controlled by 2 mega players? Just like why were payments controlled by 2 global behemoths, Master and Visa? So why should e-commerce be controlled, hypothetically, let's say, by Amazon and Flipkart? ONDC is opening up the ecosystem. And the value that they're bringing is that a lot of brands that were, held by the short and curly, so to speak, of the big players, now can get exposure. If you're a small spice manufacturer making masalas in Coimbatore, you can get the same degree of exposure on ONDC should your product be good and have a wide enough audience that today is possibly cornered by 1 or 2 large companies that possibly pay advertising money. So every time you say you want your favorite masala, those two brands show up. Now it could be an individual housewife or whatever, as long as you've got a quality, unique, differentiated offering, right? So the path they're going in is big. They're working market after market. They can't go national, but they've had some great successes. In Bangalore, they have there's a third-party platform called Nama Yatri that right now does twice as many rides as Ola plus Uber combined, right? So there is so the enablement that ONDC can do is phenomenal, and therefore will open up a huge opportunity.
Is there any VC or an accelerator that is looking at ONDC and ONDC related startups?
I think all funds are looking excitedly as brands willing to partner with ONDC, recognizing that over time, these brands could be better margined than ones dependent on closed ecosystems like Swiggy, Zomato, so to speak, right? The moment a brand is breaking out of the shackle, and belief is that long term, ONDC will succeed. I mean, one should assume it will succeed, though the levels of intuitiveness may not be as good as Amazon and Flipkart. Remember that the old platforms have our data for the last 5-10 years, and therefore are that much more sophisticated in predicting our next need. ONDC will take time, and they are not built as totally as a consumer-facing app. They are built as an enabling protocol, but directionally, yes. Please, Shabran.
I thought this was a very good session, honestly. Lot of information. I guess maybe a lot of startups would have got benefited with this call. So I also face the same thing. I do receive a lot of calls from Calcutta in terms of startups talking to me, just wanting to know more about it. What according to you is holding them back? They're the same. They have the same resources. I mean, the resources are not different. It's about the attitude of people, which I can understand. What else is holding startups in Kolkata back? What can we do to support it?
Shabran, good question. I wish I had a direct answer. But I think deep within it, I would say, is that a culture of more conservatism. So people want to be far more sure of their proposition before they go out to the market, as opposed to elsewhere. And I know this may seem like a generalization. It's the fact that in a digital world, the one fastest with the idea out there, willing to try and willing to tweak or pivot, as the startup ecosystem calls it, has a better chance to succeed. I think in general, and I've seen pitches, they're very well thought through, but people are still working the concept, they're researching the concept, they're fine-tuning the concept. I think therefore a system of, shall we say, more self-confidence, and that could be because of not enough opportunity for early stage investing. So I think the ability to go out there, try, fail fast, fail repeatedly, and then succeed. So I think it's really a function of, more conservatism. People want to get it very right? And, I guess it's also a tribute to the deeper roots and the kind of culture. But I think in the startup ecosystem, it's almost in reverse, right? When I began my career, we almost hid failures about, brands that we launched that were buried. I think today it's almost a badge of success, right? If you fail thrice, you're unlikely to fail the fourth time, is what most investors believe. So I think that's, that's the biggest holdback. The second, I think, is lack of enough exposure, right? One keeps hearing about, great technology companies coming from Bangalore and such like. I think the Cal ecosystem doesn't get amplified enough by the media. And I guess some part is, again, the fact that people are not so vocal or not so, shall we say, in your face, like in North India or elsewhere. But a little generalizations, but that's the core of my belief, because the ideas that have come from here have traditionally been very solid and very well thought through. And to my mind, another part is that if it can succeed here in a very conservative environment, the chances of succeed multiply many-fold elsewhere in the country. But great question, Samram. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was indeed wonderful. May we have a large round of applause for sir. Sir, just stay back for a minute, please. May I request Mr. Obhijit Roy, Senior Vice President, the Bengal Chamber, and MD and CEO, Berger Paints India Limited, to kindly hand over a small token of appreciation from our end.